So you want me to tell you the story of my life?
Like I said, that's what I do. I interview people. I'm a collector of lives.
Welcome to Table Talk. I'm Heath, and I'll be your host. This is the show where I go one-on-one with a creator, author, illustrator, publisher, or other mover and shaker in the world of tabletop games, video games, TV, movies, or any other area of the geekverse.
You followed me here, didn't you?
Yeah, I suppose I did. You seem very interesting. This is where you live?
Yes, this is my home. Welcome.
So, what do you do?
I'm a vampire.
That's something I haven't heard before.
Guests have included individuals such as Lou Anders, the author of the Thrones and Bones fantasy novels, creator and publisher of the Norengard RPG, and even the author of Star Wars, A Pirate's Price.
Bond. James Bond.
Well, not James Bond. I haven't gotten to talk to him yet, but maybe sometime in the future. But how about Brian Cullen, the creator of the vast, grim, dark horror RPG and sculptor of the world of Revelo monster busts? Mark Tassin, the creator of the world of Italtus, head of Mechanical Muse, and the head developer of the new Cool Name RPG. I've spoken with Jeff Engelstein, game designer and former commentator on the Dice Tower. He and I got deep into the statistics, probability, and psychological function of dice in tabletop games. Jamie Stegmaier, the founder of Stonemaier Games and crowdfunder extraordinaire. He's published many hit board games like Scythe and Wingspan. I've spoken with Sydney Engelstein from Indie Boards and Cards to talk about what it really takes to publish a board game in today's environment and what it would take for you to get published if you were trying to get a publisher for your board game. I've spoken with Ajit George about game writing, education, and his contribution to Van Richter's Guide to Ravenloft and his development of the Journey Through the Radiant Citadel Dungeons & Dragons book. Let's see, who else have I spoken to?
I am Hela, Odin's firstborn, commander of the legions of Asgard, the rightful heir to the throne and the goddess of death.
Yes, I really appreciate her taking the time to speak with me. That was a great interview. I've also spoken with Cameron Pasha, a writer and novelist who's been working in Hollywood for over 20 years. His projects have included Emmy and Golden Globe nominated Sleeper Cell, Kings, Nikita, and Roswell, New Mexico. His analysis and commentary have been very popular on YouTube. I've gotten to speak with Paul Shadow, the former network executive who has made quite a splash here on YouTube with his reaction videos to current movies and films. He and I discussed the status of independent film and web productions online today. Brianna da Silva is a reoccurring guest on the show and a very popular one at that. She's an author and director, and she was also the co-writer of the cultist comedy web show that's here on the channel. She and I regularly meet to study and analyze stories. I've also gotten to speak with of the Positive Fandom channel. She's an ally in our effort to be a positive and constructive force in the geekverse. Are you ready? Have you got your drink? Are you all settled in? You might want to buckle up because it could be a wild ride. We're about to explore the worlds of tabletop gaming, sci-fi, fantasy, and the geekverse through the eyes of those who are making things happen.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger. Ready to move out.
It's time for Table Talk. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Table Talk. It is so good to see you. We're going to be talking about the Children of Hurin tonight. And, of course, we have our reoccurring special guest with us tonight. I'm going to go ahead and bring her on. Brianna da Silva is here. Welcome, Brianna.
Hello.
Hello. And I see we've got lots of people already in the chat here. People have been talking already, which is fantastic, but I want to go ahead and bring this one up right here. Tomocrat says, hello, I'm curious if you've ever listened to the audiobook narrated by Christopher Lee. Man, does he enunciate the names. Yes, actually I have. I was reading the book. I got the Children of Hurin right here for so we can reference it during the show. But I got
we have two different versions.
But when I was about 60 or 70% of the way done, I did happen to, I thought, I wonder, for some reason I looked up the audiobook, and when I saw that it was Christopher Lee, I bought it. Like, wow, that's a treasure. I mean, this book to me is a treasure to have, but then to have Christopher Lee narrate that audiobook, who, yes, he's the one who made sure that like all the pronunciations in the Lord of the Rings movies were right. So yes, if you're looking for an audiobook, if you want to go through this book but you don't want to read it, you want to listen to it, man, the existence.
I wish I had done that. I had no. That would have been great.
Yeah. The existence of Christopher Lee reading this is just Absolutely fantastic. So, welcome to everybody. Welcome to everybody. Rare chance to catch the evening stream. I know its own intro. I tried doing a different intro for every show that I've got. Let's see here. So before we get into it, though, we do have a question from James for you, which you may want to address, Brianna. So
Yes.
James says, Brianna, if you have the time, let us know how the reading went from a couple of weeks ago. You talked about that you were doing the
Oh.
reading. So inquiring minds want to know. So you
I
want
forgot I mentioned that. Yeah, it went really well. It was really cool. I went there with just an open mind.
tell people what it was.
Oh, wait, sorry. Yes. So for people who don't know, so I live in Denver, Colorado, and there is a event here very close to where I live called Den Drama, DEN, and it's just an event every Tuesday, most Tuesdays, where local writers, screenwriters, playwrights, just different writers like that, sometimes poets, they'll submit some of their work, and then local actors who want to practice cold reading will just get up on stage and cold read it. And I've done both, even though I'm not an actor. I've done a lot of reading because I find it to be really fun too. And so I 2 weeks ago, I had there's a passion project of mine that I'm a short film, horror film that I'm planning to make as soon as I save up enough money to make it. And so I had them read it, and I was coming, just like, it's always super helpful as a writer if you're writing something that's going to be performed, to hear people perform it, even if it's cold reading, like even if they're not acting, it helps you find, flaws in the pacing and stuff. Anyway, I was expecting to find things to fix. I actually came away feeling like, wow, I think I've got it. It was really cool hearing it read, and I really feel like I felt even better about the script. So that was a really cool ego boost moment for me. But yeah, it was really cool.
Excellent. So everything is progressing well. I mentioned on the morning grind that I had the first 10 pages of my script for the first Tales of Rabavania sent out for analysis, rejected. It's boring. It's got to be fixed. Brianna we were talking about that this afternoon. Brianna and I had a meeting, our meeting this afternoon. And so first 10 pages got to be fixed on my part. Not a complete rewrite, but like a 70% rewrite. All right. Let's get into the Children of Hurin then.
Yes, and I've got my camera adjusted so that both of the dragons in my room are in the picture, because there is a dragon in this book, and I think that's fitting.
Oh, yes.
That one actually, I'm reversed. That one kind of makes me think a little bit of Glaurung. I don't know if that's how you say it, but
yes, this is. Oh wait, what's your dragon's name?
Mine is Levi, short for Levi.
Oh yeah, so Levi probably really liked this book because of Galrung. Yes, you read part 2, Levi. This is what. In fact, Galrung, he can't fly.
Yeah, he's more of a serpentine.
So he probably does serve as great inspiration for Levi. What you
positive role model for Levi. That's why I keep getting confused. That's why that dragon is right there. It's so that he can see it and be inspired while he goes to sleep every night.
All right. Where do you want to start with this and our analysis of this?
We could start with sort of overall thoughts or impressions, and then if you wanted to, we could go through kind of the story beat by beat, because I put notes for each chapter, and then I had like a bunch of thoughts when I finished. But yeah, does that sound good to you?
Okay, yeah. Initial impressions for me are very positive. I loved this. I read it when it came out, but I haven't read it since then. And in fact, this has made me want to go back and reread all of Tolkien's work, because if you're in the doldrums about geekdom, sometimes I think it's good to remember that you can go back to the original stuff that you really like. That still exists. That's still out there. And so to return to Middle Earth in Tolkien's words was just fantastic. I love it for that reason, at least, because Middle Earth is my favorite fantasy world. As I've talked about on this channel, Tolkien is one of my favorite writers. Tolkien has been very influential on me, my entire family, interested in Tolkien. So it's a major part of my family as well. So to be able to come back to Middle Earth, I really enjoyed. I love the time that this is in, because it's got such a different feel than Lord of the Rings. I mean, you've got Morgoth in here, his armies, the state of the world at this time, the elven the Elven kingdoms are, having be hidden. They're basically hidden. They're under attack and under siege, and they're being taken out. I love being at a time, when you're talking about the Lord of the Rings, you don't really see elves in action. You're not seeing wars between the elves. I mean, there was the attack on Lothlorien and Mirkwood, but even them in Lord of the Rings, they're only related secondhand. I mean, you're down there talking about Gondor and Rohan, and then later you hear about that, okay, there was some action in Mirkwood and in Lothlorien, but you don't see that. And here you get to see the elves in action, with armies and everything else that's going on. And so I also love this particular time. So so that, I guess that's my initial impression right there. What about you?
Well, mine will be an interesting contrast because I ultimately didn't like it. Although that feels a little bit too harsh because it's like there's a lot of things about it that I really appreciated and was very moved by. It was more just kind of like the general ending, I suppose, that and sort of where everything ended up and why that I don't like, but I'll get into that later. It's a personal preference thing.
No, I do have some commentary on that. On the story of Túrin itself, and we talk about its structure. I've got some commentary on that.
Yeah. But I've never read any Tolkien. I tried to read the Silmarillion once and couldn't. And I've always kind of had this since. I don't know why. I guess just because it was implanted in me when I was a lot younger that I just thought that I wouldn't want to read Lord of the Rings because it was going to be too long or something. That I think maybe someone else I knew read it and complained about it, and I just never revisited it, even though the original film trilogy is super influential on me and was part of what got me into epic fantasy. But since then, like I've read so many, like I've read, old epics. I'm currently reading, Paradise Lost. Like I read really long, slow stuff all the time. And it occurred to me recently, I'm like, what? Why do I think I wouldn't enjoy Tolkien? I certainly would. And reading this really made me think, yeah, I definitely need to go and read the Lord of the Rings books because I certainly have the taste, at least I certainly do now, that I hope to be able to appreciate it.
Okay, I think we need to do that together. And if you're reading Paradise Lost, I should read that too.
Yes.
Again, and we should go over that on stream as well.
I've been wanting to bring this up and be like, please read this. You will find it so inspiring for one of the stories you're writing, but also just because people will compare it. People will make the comparisons.
Okay. Let's plan that out when we meet again or by text or whatever. So let's add that since we've done this. Yes. Okay. It was different. Okay, so it was different than I remembered it. So so what is our story structure here? I would definitely say we're talking about a tragedy here.
Right. That was my main takeaway. This is because I came to this, I think someone recommended it as a corruption arc.
I know. And I was thinking it's not
turned over. I picked it apart as deeply as I could. I'm like, I can't find a corruption arc.
Yeah, this is not corruption. This is tragedy.
It certainly has elements that it could have gone that way. Like it could have been a corruption arc, but what it is ultimately is it's a tragedy, but in the style of like Greek tragedies. Which is the thing that I don't like. It's very much like these characters. I mean, I would say the main character is an anti-hero. He's certainly not perfect and he has a lot of flaws, which he could have corrupted because of those flaws. But he doesn't. Like he's someone that's trying to do the right thing and he's trying to be a good person. And he's, he has all these really admirable qualities in addition to his flaws. So I would kind of put him in the anti-hero. Well, one of the last things he does in his life is the super heroic thing where he's, not sacrificing his life, but risking his life to slay this dragon and save people. Like it doesn't get more heroic and quintessentially heroic than that. But like they're cursed, and the tragedy kind of comes in like this fate way. Like as much as everyone in the family courageously stands up to evil still comes for them. And it's like, well, that's a bummer. It makes me think more of like Oedipus than say The Godfather. It's more like that. It's more like a tragedy. Like here's your fate. Oh, well.
Yeah. So, okay, we start long before Hurin. And what is in this, and I was trying to think, what is this book about?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I didn't even think about that one.
Well,
because it felt like such a bummer. Like sorry to interrupt your thought.
Oh, no,
But it was like
go
in
ahead.
chapter 3 or so, I think I read this question where I was like, is this book going to like narratively punish these characters for being heroic and for being courageous? And ultimately I had to conclude that the answer was yes, that like it was just a real depressing, situation where this character, it was Morgoth, was so, powerful, no one could really stand up to him. And there are so many really valiant, honorable people in here that meet tragic ends, including side characters. And sometimes almost because they're being like doing the right thing. So I don't even know what to take away from that.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, I think the curse of Morgoth is what I think this is supposed to be about fate.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the curse of Morgoth. Now, I do love that scene.
That was epic. Yeah.
I know when Hurin has been captured after fighting this valiant rear guard to allow the elves of Gondolin to escape. And fighting this valiant rear guard, he is captured. And that's another reason why I do like this book, is because you don't ever hear from Sauron in The Lord of the Rings. I mean, you don't ever have him as a character talking about something like that. But here you've got Morgoth with Hurin doing some pretty epic stuff with Hurin, trying to get Hurin to reveal the location of Gondolin, and he won't. And so he curses the children. And so he says, I am the elder king, Melkor, first and mightiest among the Valar, who was before the world and made it. The shadow of my purpose lies upon Arda, and all that is within it bends slowly and surely to my will. But upon all who you love, my thought shall weigh as a cloud of doom, and it shall bring them down into darkness and despair. Wherever they go, evil shall arise. Wherever they speak, their words shall bring ill counsel. Whatever they do shall turn against them. They shall die without hope, cursing both life and death. And so that's the curse.
Yeah.
That's laid upon them. And actually, what Chris is, that actually I think should be emphasized more. Like, I went back and found that, because like this is what this is about. It comes later in the book. I mean, it starts. I love the way that it starts, because it's telling the history of the elves. But as far as a classic story structure, like, this is all like the prologue essentially to what's about to happen to Túrin. Okay,
Right.
but that's it. And then of course I do love that actually this is told as like a drama that is that is unfolding before Hurin, because Melkor takes him up to the top of his castle and makes it so that he cannot die. Sits him down in a chair to watch what is about to unfold over the land, and makes it so that he cannot die.
There's the picture of that.
Yes. And makes it so that he cannot die, and he has to watch what is going to unfold. So Hurin is basically watching this as a drama.
Yeah,
right?
and you're kind of knowing that in the back of your head while you're reading. You're like, oh, these guys don't know what's happening, but the father sure does. That sucks. He's sitting back there going, no, don't do it.
So now the question is, so to me that kind of ends the prologue, because I was also trying to think of what is the structure of this story, because I don't think it's completely it's not like a complete classic story structure, because all of that is basically the prologue. Once we get to that curse being laid, that's now set the scene for everything that is about to come, as I think.
In terms of structure, it kind of vaguely reminds me of, what's the official term for this? The kind of stories that you would have in Iceland. The epics of Iceland, they have a certain term. I can't remember, but they have this sort of, I say this as someone who hasn't read any of them. I'm like familiar with some of the stories, but they have this sort of there's a theme where there's a family that you're following, and so, a lot of events happening along the way, and then it ends in tragedy often. They're all really depressing. It kind of makes me think of like an Icelandic, epic.
But now,
Toilet of Immortality. Exactly.
Okay. So I think the question that you're supposed to ask and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think the question that you're supposed to ask is how much then that follows with what happened to Túrin is the result of that curse, and how much of it is his own doing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think this story is supposed to be about fate versus free will.
Interesting.
So this curse has been laid. Now the question is, without everything else that's happening, that everything that happens to this guy, because he is a great hero, a great warrior, and everything else.
But
does this happen? But does all of this happen to him? Because it's his choices that bring about all the terrible things that happen in this story.
I mean, it's complicated too, because it's like his choices are not always some of them are obvious. Some of them are like, no, Túrin, you shouldn't do that. That's prideful. That's not wise. And then he does it anyway, and then a bad thing happens. But sometimes it's a little bit more complicated. It's like sometimes his choices I don't feel like are super morally clear, and it does seem like he's just kind of making the best choice he can in the moment, given his he has all this darkness in him, which to me seems less a reflection of mere character and more a reflection of just the hardship he's been through. He's gone through quite a lot of shit. Has a lot of anger as a result of things he's experienced, which also causes him to make poor decisions. So it's kind of like it doesn't seem like it's easy to parse out exactly which is which, although in some cases I think it is. But yeah, that's really interesting. You might be on something there. I think that, I didn't even think about it that way. But that seems to track. So I have some ominous quotes I could bring that back up what you're saying too.
Okay.
Hold on. I have to flip through a little bit because my notes on individual chapters are all kind of like spread out. Hold on. Because people talk a lot about, because there's a lot of warnings. This is why at the beginning I thought it was.
There's a lot of warnings, yes.
A lot of people are warning him about his pride. Mainly his pride.
Pride is a big thing. I picked up on pride too. Now, pride being our classic sin of the fall. He is very prideful.
He is. So there were some from chapter 5 that I thought were pretty powerful. One person tells him, fear both the heat and the cold of your heart. Another person's like, your words are too proud. Learn wisdom. Another person tells him, a shadow is over you. When we meet again, may it be no darker. And so that one is like, well, is that the shadow of the curse? Is that the shadow of his own heart? It seems the answer is both. Let's see. I know I have some more somewhere. I got to go to my other notebook. I finished one notebook and then started another one over the course of this. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting quotes like that. Some of them I just kind of underline. I didn't write them down.
Well,
but
on the subject of warning, I've got one right here.
Go ahead.
Because I specifically wanted to go back and also read the warning about the sword.
Oh, interesting.
That Queen Melian gives. Because when Beleg is tasked to go and find Túrin, he asks for a sword, and he takes Anglicál. But as Thingol turned the hilt of Anglicál towards Beleg, Melian looked at the blade, and she said, there is malice in this sword. The heart of the smith that dwells in it, the heart of the smith still dwells in it, and that heart was dark. It will not love the hand that it serves, neither will it abide with you long. But he says, nonetheless, I will wield it while I may, said Beleg, and he took the sword and departed.
Yeah, he does a lot of things like that.
Well, that wasn't Túrin, that was Beleg.
Oh, that was Beleg. Oh,
yeah, because Beleg had been tasked, and so Beleg had the sword, and it wasn't until that Túrin slew him that he took that sword.
Oh, I missed that detail. I'm trying to find a specific.
So there was the warning about the sword too.
Yeah, well, I'm missing one specific one, but I'll remember it. But there was one that I thought you could almost see like a causal relationship in terms of some of the things that happened, where basically, he has his pride. This was later on when he's kind of living as an outlaw, despite the fact that he actually was an outlaw, because that choice was partially pride. He didn't want people to pity him because of what happened to him. So he's just like, yeah, I'm just going to live with these criminals. But then you see him being complicated because he is a bit of the moral reason amongst these criminals. So he the voice of morality, he kind of brings them away from some of their darkness. But then he ends up wanting to be his own lord, right? And that's one of the things that his pride leads him to do, is he creates this little camp of people, basically, where he's in charge, and he's not having to answer to anyone else. And his friend Beleg is warning him. He's like, yo, we can't stay here. Like, we're in danger here. Like, eventually Morgoth is going to come and overtake us. And he says something like, nevertheless, I'm going to stay here. And he says, like, if I fall, I fall. I thought that was an interesting quote, because very soon after that, what do you know? Beleg was right. Morgoth comes and takes them. And a causal thing that happens out of that is, like, he's captured, and then when his friend comes to try to rescue him, he accidentally ends up slaying his friend. And so that was like an example of something dark that happened as a direct result of him choosing pride over reason. But then I couldn't find causal relationships like after that, because it seems after that he then goes and is remorseful and tries to put the darkness behind him. But yeah, and so then there was another one when I thought it was a corruption arc. There was a point where I thought it was shifting, and that was in chapter 12 when he like slays all those people back in like his homeland. I mean, that moment was pretty dark.
Yeah.
He says before that, he says, "Truly, my heart is grim," and he acts with the strength of his great anguish and wrath. Great anguish and wrath, and I think those two are tied. Like there's a lot of pain behind his rage, and he kind of felt restrained in his anger until that moment when it was just like this outpouring of violence. And I was like, oh shit, like this guy's about to become something really dark. But then immediately after that, he's like, he's super remorseful. He's trying to make sure that kind of thing never happens again. And so it doesn't really seem, like there isn't any corruption going on. It just seems like a complicated character that you kind of feel bad for. You're like, you need some help. And I don't know. Anyway, those are some of those quotes.
Now, Dan Halstead says more than that. He's making his choices specifically to avoid the curse.
That's a good
So
point.
would he still have made the same choices if he wasn't cursed?
Well, I mean, that
that's
example of him being a lord, I think he might have, because that one I think was more his pride as opposed to trying to avoid the curse. But a lot of the choices are to avoid the curse too.
And then James says, Candace, my archaeologist wife, says that in cultures that believe in curses, those who believe they are cursed invariably die young. Sometimes it's psychosomatic, sometimes reckless abandon. And I think those, and when he says, so is this really about the curse or about his free will? I think that's what this is about. But that's what I got out of it. Now, okay, we're talking about points that I think could be better, because I do have those. But let me talk about something else first. What was Túrin supposed to do? What do you want him to do, and what was he supposed to have done?
That wasn't clear to me. What about you?
Oh, it wasn't unclear to me. What he was supposed to have done, because he was raised by Thingol in Doriath, and he's he's the heir of this great house. His father is this great hero, but he was overrun. He's fostered with the Elven King. So what is he supposed to do? He is supposed to reclaim his homeland. I mean, what he's supposed to do is use all of this knowledge about becoming a great elf lord. Thingol even tells him, you're not quite ready to go back and reclaim your homeland yet. But if you want to, I will appoint you among the knights who are fighting along the marches of Doriath so you can learn warfare. And there is this moment then, and he does accept that in the beginning. And there is that moment when he is fighting with Beleg. This is before he comes back, and the whole incident with Sarek, the elf counselor. Before he's so before that, there's this period of time where he is a great warrior with Beleg. He's fighting among the elf warriors on the marches. He is doing great things, and that's what he's supposed to be doing. And so it seems like if he followed his true path, let's say, then he would learn all of that, and that at some point Thingol would say, okay, you are now ready. He would rally this host of men who have been out, perhaps in exile. He would add elven knights of his own, and then Túrin would go back to Dor-lómin, rout the Easterlings there, reconquer his land, take up the resettle the house of his father, and become a good and just lord in Dor-lómin. That's what he's supposed. That seems like to me what he was supposed to do.
That makes sense.
And so I think it sets it up. I guess maybe this is what that classic word, subversion of expectations. I feel like it set the story up that you're expecting, if this is going to be the classic heroes kind of arc, that's where this is going to end. He's going to return to Dor-lómin, and he is going to be successful and become a great lord and drive them out.
Right.
But then everything that he does is counter to that. Because he never gets to do that. He does go back, like you were talking about. He does eventually go back to his homeland, but he doesn't. He sets up some type of rebellion, but
it kind of makes things worse rather than improving it.
When it even makes them worse for his people, right?
Yeah.
So it's exactly opposite of what he was, I think, supposed to have done in what it was setting you up to expect.
That's interesting. Yeah.
In fact, it kind of reminds me of what's one of the Viking stories that's being told right now? The Last Kingdom, by Bernard Cornwell. It's been turned into a TV show now, but you've got Uhtred, who was run out. His uncle stole his lordship, or whatever, and he's run out and everything like that. And so what you're expecting in these stories is for Uhtred to eventually return to his homeland, run out his scheming uncle, and take back control. And now maybe he will eventually do that, but I kind of lost interest in this series of books because it just seemed to me like I loved the first set of, like, the first 3 or 4, something like that. They're some of my favorites. I love them. But it just felt like, okay, the author knows that you're really waiting for him to go back and to kick his uncle's butt and all that. So I'm just going to keep dragging you out and having you buy much more books. And then I kind of lost interest, even though I love about the first 3 or 4.
Interesting.
But so there's the same kind of thing. That's what you were expecting to happen. But this book doesn't just drag it out. It's not like, okay, we're going to,
it's like an actual diversion.
It goes in a completely different direction that you're not able to do that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I could see why someone had recommended it as a corruption arc, because it's not a corruption arc, but it's kind of in the same family. It's a tragedy, and there are, people making the wrong choices, people making the right choices too, and just kind of dealing with fate. But I think you're right that is an element of the story. So I could see how it might be misconstrued as one.
And the whole deal, before we get to some things that I think could have been stronger, but I mean, he almost does that again in Nargothrond, when he gets to Nargothrond, and it's almost a story like Moses and the Pharaoh. He comes to Nargothrond without anything, to speak of, and then he rises to the king's chief counselor down in Nargothrond. And again, you're kind of thinking, okay, well, now you've got an army that, and if you're not going to go to Doriath, okay, well, then here in Nargothrond, you can get something going here. But his decisions in end up in its complete destruction. Like, he's the reason that Nargothrond is just completely destroyed.
Our good boy Glaurung comes and messes things up
and takes care of that. So on the other hand, it's kind of like, right, he can't get out of his way. That's kind of one of those things where, okay, maybe he wouldn't be that great a lord I mean, he has that experience in Nargothrond, where he's effectively its king. He's not its king, but he says that, you know, the king takes his counsel and everything, and he's basically running the whole place. And even Ulmo, you know, one of the Valinor, sends words, hey, what you're doing, you need to stop this. And he completely rebuffs that. So that's the point of pride. His pride brings down all of Nargothrond, and then that sends this all spiraling downward. Okay. Do you have any other comments there?
No, I have some other sort of side notes of praise as a storyteller, but we could come back to that if you want, or talk about it, or I don't care when. But no, I don't have any more notes on that front.
Okay, I've got. Why don't we talk about the things that if you've got some points of praise, let's talk about that, because I've got 3 points that I think could be stronger. So let's continue to talk about that before we go on to these points.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because, you know, it's written sort of halfway between the style of like a novel and halfway between this and the style of like a you know, an old myth. Myth is clearly more the point of inspiration. But I was kind of surprised that despite the fact that it's written in such a distant kind of a tone, that I really connected very quickly with Túrin and as a character. I mean, it was even when he was a kid, like at the beginning. I thought that was kind of interesting. So I was thinking about like why that was. And there, you know, several principles apply. Hold on, let me find my notes. Oh, dang it, I just lost them. Hold on. I had them marked. I mean, one of them was basically that, you know, of course he's a kid, so you kind of like at that point you instantly care about, you know, a kid. But it was also, you saw that he was, I think I'm remembering it, even though I can't find the notes, that he was very human in the sense that like you could already see some of his flaws even when he was a kid. And that made him kind of vulnerable and interesting. But you also saw his pain. Like he encountered tragedy when he was pretty young too, with his first sister that died. And I found that theme continues on. You know, like like I said, even though he had a lot of flaws, I was still kind of like wanting him to succeed, even though I knew he wasn't going to. And I think that's just a great example of how powerful those principles can be, even if it's a story where it's not that close and intimate, where you're not like in the character's head per se, that you can still root for someone to a certain extent, or at least care about them enough to want to read their story. It just sometimes just takes a little bit of some empathy and humanity. And so just a side note that that I noticed, at least for me as a reader.
Well, I talk about the feel quite a lot on this channel, the feel of things. So that was another one of the like when I was talking about the reasons that I like it.
Right.
The feel is a big one to me.
Yeah, there's some beautiful stuff in there.
Yeah,
that battle at the beginning too, that really moved me.
Oh yeah,
On a primal level, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, the feel, it invokes such a feel in me about being back in Middle Earth at this particular point, which is another reason why I really like it. I'm big on the feel. Okay, now where I would think that the weak points to me. Oh wait, what was this point? Oh wait. Okay, so the first point though, that the thing that gets him exiled, I thought was weak.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't disclose to Mablung that he was attacked by the counselor.
Yeah, it was weird that he didn't do that. I think it was supposed to be implied that it was some sort of pride thing, but it did feel like, bro, just say something. Like,
I know, like,
arbitrary. Yeah,
you could have fixed a lot of this just by saying that, and it seems like that would be an obvious thing to say.
Yeah, that is a good point. It is kind of frustrating as a reader when it's like some big drama happens just because characters don't communicate with each other. It's like, just communicate. Like, yeah.
So that I felt was weak. I needed some type of different reason for there to be some kind of misunderstanding, especially since the I thought that that was the elf maiden that he liked. And it was that when Bellig walks into the king's court, I was like, oh my God, I love those moments. I was like, oh my God, he's got the elf maiden, because she was watching and she understood what was going on.
Right.
So I thought that sequence was weak because he would have just said that, and
Yeah.
and because the king found out anyway rather fast.
Hmm. And then it was kind of arbitrary that they couldn't find him. They're like, "Oh, we gotta tell him he's not exiled. Where'd he go?"
Right. Yeah. So
That's
it
fair
seems
point.
like, okay, if it seems like I wanted a better reason for him not to say that,
Yeah.
and then go ahead and let him be exiled, and then have that elf maiden come in much later
Hmm.
and absolve him. So that way that way there's actually a time when he is actually exiled, and
Hmm.
Thingol is upset with him, because you just want him to go back home. like
Right.
if what he's supposed to do is lead a big host to reconquer Dorlomin, then you're like, man, your foster father Thingol will still receive you. Just go back. There needed to be and of course that's what you're wanting him to do, but he just won't.
Mhm.
But I think I would have given him a reason to not go back
Hmm.
if for a while Thingol did actually think that he had done something wrong.
Yeah.
Uh, a while being more than the duration of the court. I also didn't understand the part there that seems to be implied, or maybe this is not implied and I'm just interpreting something wrong. But it seemed to imply that Findulius, who he met in Nargothrond, who loved him, who was like the elf
Oh.
princess in Nargothrond,
Mhm.
that she was somehow instrumental in potentially breaking the curse.
Yeah, it seemed like she was important, but I couldn't quite figure out what her importance was, and I couldn't figure that one out.
Right. So yeah, so she loved him and blah blah blah, and there was all that. And
Mhm.
then he's supposed to protect her and needs to go back and save her. And of
Yeah.
course, that's when Galrung intervenes.
But he doesn't he at that point have a choice between, like, her and his family? I think that's what it was. It was like, well, of course he's gonna go to his family.
Right. He was told, but what I was, yes. So let's talk about that in just a moment. But it seemed to be implied that if he had chosen Findulius, that the curse would have been lifted.
Hmm.
And I didn't understand why. Or
Yeah.
maybe that's not true, but it seemed like at some point that what he was supposed to do at that point was
Yeah.
rescue her.
Yeah, it did seem like that.
Because he was supposed to rescue her, and then he didn't. He chose his family. And the reason he chose his family is just because of the lies of the dragon. The dragon lied and told him that his sister and mother were in thraldom up in Dorlomin.
Yeah. So that didn't
And
seem fair. It seemed like he was set up fair. Like who would not have made the choice that he made at that point, you know? So it seems more like fate. It was like you're putting it some like you're saying, okay, well, he could potentially get out of the curse, but it's in a way that like no one would ever do. And so it just feels like again, like he's a character that's set up to fail from
yeah,
what I feel.
and it wasn't so. If that's true, if we rewrote this to actually do something like what I would have done, then I think is add something to the curse of Morgoth
Hmm.
to make it more like something like uh, what's her name in Sleeping Beauty?
Oh, right, right. Maleficent. There's a way
Maleficent,
out
right.
of it.
There's some kind of way out of it, right? And that he
Unless you
could
have
have
true
chosen,
love's kiss. Yeah.
right? And he could have chosen that, but he doesn't.
Yeah, that would
Okay,
have been
so
interesting.
now we're going to tragedy. So I think I would have added that, and I would have had to do something with Findulius, like
Mhm.
so. Would have had that, and then I wouldn't have had it be the dragon lying, because his family is not up there. They've already gone to Dariath. So I would have had the dragon speak the truth or something,
Hmm.
and then he would have had to have made an actual decision.
Yeah.
And he can make the wrong one. That's fine. Okay. And then we're going to end in tragedy. But I would have had some much more clear way regarding her that the curse could be broken and have it be an actual choice on his part.
Yeah, I agree. I would have much preferred that, and that kind of fits in with the general thing that I dislike. Yeah, with it just being that kind of a tragedy. Because and I guess I can go ahead and say this now. For me, the reason why I'm opposed to those kinds of stories, it's almost like a ideological in a sense. Like to me, I just don't think it's healthy in general to even though from a certain philosophical perspective that is kind of true in a sense that like free will is scientifically kind of an illusion. That's a whole thing. But it's like I don't think it's healthy to think that way. To I don't like telling stories where it's basically just there isn't the autonomy of the characters because I think it's better that we tell stories as humans as conscious agents where we think of ourselves as being conscious agents or with autonomy. And so I prefer those kinds of stories. I don't really know what the utility is of telling a Greek style tragedy. Yeah, it just it's like a helplessness to it, and I'm like, I don't really think that's good, good for us. So that's why I don't like that.
Uh, okay, I think that goes to tell us what type of moral we're supposed to ingest
Hmm.
as a result of the story. Like, what are we supposed to be spiritually ingesting as the result of the story? Now,
Yeah.
we had mentioned, as Drake over here was talking about, that it's possible to tell the hero's journey as a tragedy because we need more clarity on what exactly it means to be a tragedy. Because I would say this is a tragedy in the Greek style.
I mean, a tragedy, I think, is just um, one of. I mean, I've always thought of it as like you have your quadrant of what the character wants and what the character needs. They might get neither. They might get both. They might get one or the other. And if you just get one versus the other, it could be kind of bittersweet. But like a tragedy to me is like character doesn't get what they want or need. They don't. It's not a
Oh,
happy ending.
well,
Um,
to the contrary, I would have said that if you set up a character with what they want and what they need,
mhm.
according to one particular philosophy, if the character gets what they want, then it's going to be a tragedy.
Oh, true. I would agree with that. That
Yeah.
would, yeah.
Yeah, they need if they get what they need, then you end up with a happy ending story.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's a good correction.
But
But yeah, I guess that would be the more precise way. It's just a matter of like if they get what they need or not. Maybe that's the determination of whether or not it's a tragedy. I think you're right.
so I think now, of course, in Tolkien's defense here, I mean, this was assembled and edited by Christopher Tolkien long, long after his death in order to put together.
Sure,
So it
sure.
may not have been in its complete final
It's kind of
form
a
as Tolkien would have.
right. It's a hybridization of both both of their efforts.
Um, so I would have fixed that. That would have been something that I would have fixed. The deal with Findulus and a choice to break to make it even that could even make it more brutal on Hurin as he's watching.
Yeah, yeah, and that
Now,
would be interesting morally.
Morgoth is trying to prove a point here, that no, I am this powerful. You're going to sit here and watch what I'm about to do.
Yeah.
But it would have been even more heartbreaking to Hurin if there was a way out of it
Hmm.
and his children didn't choose it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and then the other thing that I think I would have improved, that I wanted more out of in the story, and I think I would have changed, is the sister.
I did want to see more of her. She kind of comes in late. And you're like, oh, I thought she was cool. I wanted to know more, but you only see her briefly, and then she's instantly, has her memory wiped and stuff. And um, yeah,
Yeah,
she was interesting.
it's mainly about Hurin. Excuse
Mhm.
me, it's mainly about Túrin
Yeah,
and what all he is doing. But if we're talking about a curse upon the children of Hurin, I think I would have liked for her to have just as interesting kind of a twisting arc and
yeah,
have her have choices that cause this. Now she did ride out, to try to go to Nargothrond to see what was going on. So but I
yeah.
would
But
have
I
given her
couldn't
more.
blame her for any of those choices. To me, they just seemed like courage and devotion to the people she cared about.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, I didn't blame her for riding out to try to get to Nargothrond either,
Mhm.
and to go and see with her mother. Um, but I would have given her more because she spent a lot of time sitting around in Doriath, and
Yeah.
so she needed to have the same kinds of decision points that Túrin had, where you could have done X or you could have done Y, and her choices also bring about some type of horrible thing, that is.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was thinking because I'm always thinking like a filmmaker. I was like, if this was turned into a TV series, what kind of changes would there be? I mean, I only thought that casually, but one of the things that stood out to me was like, oh, well, they would clearly enlarge her story and make her, that we are following what's going on with her as well. With him, maybe not to the same extent, but she would certainly be a bigger part of the story. That seems like an obvious thing that would take the story to another level.
You either increase her role or you drop her.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah,
you
and just make it
might
about
have been able to tell this if you're just telling the story about the tragedy of Túrin.
right.
You might be able to tell that without her.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, because it's
maybe.
called The Children of Hurin, so it's like, well, the whole time I'm just waiting for her to come into the story.
Right. And what happened? Did she die with her unborn daughter? The daughter was
Yeah,
never, or the child. We don't know whether it's the
yeah,
son or daughter. I guess she died with that. So there was
yeah.
no,
No offspring, which
no,
probably was good.
um, so those are my three big things that I would change that I think are critiques of the story as far as the structure goes. Um, of course, it's not like Túrin is completely not heroic because he does come up. And the death of Galrung is also very influential on me. I remember a painting about that had Túrin Turambar and the death of Galrung and killing him. So I remember that from childhood, and also the death of Túrin and the death of Galrung is influential with me because its motifs appear in Clovis and Enorda.
Oh, for real?
Yeah. Um, okay. What was I was going to say something else, but I forget at the moment.
Cool.
But so then at the end, again, kind of as the drama goes, that once they're dead, Morgoth lets Hurin go.
Yeah.
He lets him go. He has suffered. He has seen what has happened. He's seen his might. I wanted to know, I was kind of wondering what was going on to happen with Hurin after that.
And now he's all alone.
Right.
But it's, like, so unfair. I mean, why? Well, why does he have to deal with all this?
He meets his wife at the grave because she had run off and you didn't know about her. So I liked her. That was like, oh, and I did like that. I was
That
like,
she
oh my
was
God,
brought back. Yeah,
that's
that
his
was good.
wife. His wife is there at their grave.
Mhm.
And they have that moment. But then what does Hurin do? I mean, now maybe it's better left unanswered as far as the story goes.
Hmm.
But he had been this great hero because it's also sort of his tragedy as well. Now he has his great moment. He is this obviously a great lord of men. He has trained in Gondolin. He fights this valiant rear guard to allow them to escape. And you think about what could he have done if he were not just sitting, in the chair, being forced to look at the fate of his children for decades, right? It was like, 20 years or something like that. I forget what it was, but something like that. So that's also pretty tragic that, I mean, he was a pretty good guy and you think that could have been a great lord of Dorloman. And he oversees the complete, that he's completely out of action until he's basically too old to function. And then he has to see all of this. His children, which could have been great, bring about all of this destruction. And then he's just left. Yeah, I get that there's nothing. I guess he's turned loose because there's nothing left for him to do.
Right.
Like he can't do more. Like his time has already passed.
Yep. Definitely tragedy. I know. I assume you probably know some of the history of Middle Earth. So, or because you've read the Silmarillion, can you tell me it all? Do you remember it all? How Morgoth is defeated? Because that would be satisfying. If not, I'll go look it up myself. It's like, well, what happens next?
Yeah, well, I've been actually trying to. I was actually thinking about that, and I was like, no, where is it? Because it's been a long time since I have read the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
But so Morgoth was defeated by the host of the Valinor. Because it's the other things we got to go through is like Gondolin. Morgoth was defeated by the host of the Valinor in the War of Wrath. As punishment, he was banished from Arda into the Void, though it is prophesied that he will one day return. So the host of Valinor comes, from Valinor, obviously, to help them out, and that's ends up defeating them. Oh, by the way, speaking of Gondolin, let's talk about.
Someone's answering in the comments.
Okay, so there we go. Morgoth was defeated by a holy spaceship, kinda, sorta.
There's James Bacon before that saying he's bound and cast into the void.
He cannot be destroyed. Yeah,
that kind of makes me think of my story. It cannot be destroyed.
They come that the Valinor ultimately basically takes pity upon the elves and what is going on, because it just is constant destruction, and then eventually do come and help them out to get rid of Morgoth. The Gondolin, I wanted I had forgotten. Like, for instance, opening the Leaguer of Gondolin, it's always stuck with me. And you've got the Gondolin, the hidden city, and Turgon is there. And so he does come out. I was disappointed that he came out to the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. Because if you've got this hidden city, and he's not going to leave until he's ready. But then he does leave to come to the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. So when they show up, I kind of wanted that to be victory. Now, of course, this is not a story of a terrible victory, but he shows up with his 10,000 elves all armed and armored and everything like that. And then eventually he escapes and returns to Gondolin again. I wanted the opening of the Leaguer of Gondolin to be a big victorious thing. Like when Turgon finally comes, man, my God, the elves of Gondolin are here. And so I was disappointed that when the elves of Gondolin, because I had forgotten this, Gondolin does open, Turgon comes, you got 10,000 elves, and they're at this battle, and they don't, it's unsuccessful.
Yeah.
It seems like you should have, it seems like they shouldn't have been there from the story structure. They're like, we got to save these elves. And so when all of a sudden the elves of Gondolin show up, that things are about to turn around.
It didn't seem to really have much to do with anything. We introduced this it's like a Chekhov's gun situation where we introduce this hidden city, and it never really does anything in the story. It's just like, oh yeah, there's this hidden city. I'll never tell you where it is. Okay. And then we never hear about them again. Like they come to the battle, and then I don't think they ever came back into the story. I kept thinking they were going to.
Right. Yeah, they don't come back here. So I think I would have changed that. And of course, we do have to go through the destruction of Gondolin. So eventually that gets destroyed too. I mean, this whole thing does not go well for them, which is why eventually the host of Valinor shows up and drives off, just because they've been fighting this losing war against Morgoth for this for so long. But yeah, they needed a bigger impact there. Or to not be there. Now, you still could have had that, because why does Morgoth is tormenting Hurin? Is because he thinks he knows where Gondolin is.
Yeah.
And he's not going to, and Hurin won't tell him.
So there's a little bit of a small, tiny victory there, in the sense that Morgoth never does find out where it is. But,
right. Yeah. Well, at that moment, I mean, like I said, we do have the destruction of Gondolin, so we do go through the destruction of Gondolin. But we still could have had that moment, and even if they had not shown up on at the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, I think I would have changed that so that they don't show up. So they don't show up, and then have Hurin's rear guard being fought for something else. That he's defending somebody else getting out of there. James says a lot of the story in the Second Age is in service to Morgoth. It's a chronicle of his evil. It serves to inform his character and thereby the character of Sauron. And Dan says it involves a giant lightning-breathing dragon and a magical flying ship, like bigger than a country-sized dragon.
It's pretty big.
All right. All right. So what else do we need to say?
I don't know. I think those are all my comments. I was a little bit let down because I was wanting to study a corruption arc. But you know, it's dark.
Yeah, it wasn't corruption. It wasn't.
Yeah, I like dark
It was
fantasy.
tragedy. It was tragedy.
But yeah, it was tragedy. But I mean, that was something we've been talking about too, is tragedy. So, you know, the corruption arc I'm writing is a tragedy too. It's just a tragedy for other reasons. So I guess it's still relevant to read. And it's beautiful. It has really cool pictures in it. So that is definitely a plus.
I guess we could leave on this note. Does it have to have some type of message?
I guess
we're talking about like what type of message does it have? But does it have to? So I think this is I think it's about the free will situation. But on the other hand, if it's not communicating some type of message, but I still enjoyed it, is that a problem?
Well, I mean, personally, I find that unsatisfying. Like it definitely reduces my enjoyment of a story if I feel like there isn't a point to it. You know, I think there's at least a craving that I feel, and I imagine a lot of people feel. Maybe not everyone, but that like part of what I think I value in stories and storytelling is the wisdom that it at least attempts to convey. And then you can engage with that wisdom and decide whether or not you agree with it or whatever. But I was talking with another friend of mine actually last week about stories and myths, and that was something that they brought up. My friend Chris, they were saying that like that's like what you find in myths and in a lot of religious stories in particular, that there's wisdom in it. And I thought that really resonated. That really resonated with me. I was like, yeah, that's kind of like you're going through these stories, especially these kinds of stories, these kind of mythic kind of stories that Tolkien would write, and you and I often write, you know, where there's something deeper there, even if it's something subtle, even if it's something small. Ultimately, it's entertaining and all that. But I think what draws me to stories over and over again is like what's kind of on a deeper level. And I don't want it to preach to me, but I want it to make me think about how to be a human and how to interact in the world and how to treat other people and what I should value and things like that. So for me, I do feel like I want stories to, I don't know if I like the word message. I wouldn't say the word message, but have like a sort of a point or sort of a token of wisdom to offer, I suppose.
So we could have something like Dan says, a big Tolkien theme is fate versus free will. He seems to say both happen at once. In Lord of the Rings, the heroes accept their fate and choose mercy for others, leading to salvation for all. In contrast, Túrin tragically chooses to valiantly fight his fate, even at the expense of others.
That's really interesting.
So, because you could tell that. You could say, like, that seems particularly Norse to me, especially if you think that this is all ending badly. Now, because you could, I mean, that could be you don't want to use the word message, but that's just, okay, this is all ending badly. But what's important here is how we act in face of not being able to control things, or the fact that this is predetermined to end badly.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think that's necessarily Túrin's story, because he makes some, because we could say that, hey, listen, he's cursed and that we know this is going to end badly.
Yeah.
So, and he knows that. And yet, nonetheless, he is valiant and he's making the best choices that he can in spite of that.
That's how I felt reading it. I felt like I kind of respected him. He wasn't perfect. He didn't always make good choices, but he made very understandable choices, I would say. And it seemed like he was very courageous and in the spite of all the darkness around him. Then
maybe that could be something that if you are trying to talk about the power of evil, like if you're trying to tell us something about a fatalistic story about the power of evil, that this is going to end badly. There are forces that no matter how good you are, you can't counteract. But what's important is how you behave in face of those forces. Maybe that's what you could get out of a story like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like I kind of need to think more about what that commenter Dan Halstead said, because that's so interesting, that contrast between Lord of the Rings, the heroes accepting their fate, and choosing mercy for others, leading to the salvation for all, whereas Túrin tragically chooses to valiantly fight his fate, even at the expense of others. Because that seems true too at the same time. But I also don't know that I would think that the correct thing for Túrin to do is to accept his fate. Like if there's something that dark, I don't know that I would want to. I don't know that that's what I would agree with, is the idea that you should just accept it. But I think what you're saying is really interesting too. That idea of like, how do you act in light of that's maybe part of what he needed to do, was to accept that it was coming. And who could do that? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. So I guess there is something there to reflect on, huh?
All right, because I do like, as I want to tell a story about a tragic hero.
Yeah.
Because I like the idea of that flaw that is going to ultimately bring them down.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so are you going to go to your meeting tonight?
I actually haven't decided, and if I do, I technically have time, but I'm not sure if they're doing it. I need to check, but I may. We'll see if I feel like it.
All right. Well, I think this has been productive. I think that we should definitely read along some other stories. So
yeah, this has been fun. We should keep doing this.
I think that if we did Lord of the Rings, we should do it in chunks by like chapter or a couple of chapters. That way we're not trying to cram and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But also if we did, like, we couldn't, you said you would try to do the Silmarillion, but couldn't. But, that's a collection of a whole bunch of different stories.
Right.
So just because you start at the beginning, because start at the beginning and try to, but like one particular story end or something like that, maybe we could do. But
kind of like the Bible,
I think,
you shouldn't try to read it from cover to cover.
Yeah, I think doing the Lord of the Rings would be great, because I would love. This has made me want to go back and reread so much of that. So that, but then also, wait, what was the when you said you were reading?
The Paradise Lost.
Paradise Lost. We should definitely do Paradise Lost.
That would be fun. That one we should do kind of in chunks too. I think.
Okay, let's plan that out. I would love to do that.
I feel like another great thing to do would be, before we leave, is just like ask the commenters, whether now or later, like if there's anything they would like to see us talk about.
Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, that's
this one was recommended by someone on one of these live streams. So
it was. This was recommended. I forget who it was, but I was so glad that it was. It was not exactly what I remembered, but I did just really enjoy being back in Middle Earth and experiencing it. Yeah, absolutely.
Someone says Beowulf. Now that's a good one, because you and I have both been meaning to read it, right? You haven't read it, or have you not read it in a while? Or I haven't read it at all.
I think we went through Beowulf in high school.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, Beowulf could definitely be done. Let me make note of these things. So we got to do Paradise Lost.
Oh, these are cool. I love old epic stories.
Now, you have done Odysseus,
the Odyssey and the Iliad. Yeah. Yes, but I would absolutely read them again. In fact, I've been meaning to. So,
Cameron specifically told me to go through the Odyssey.
The Odyssey is great.
Yeah.
I feel like the Iliad grew with me more, but the Odyssey is more fun to read.
Okay.
Another potential one, if it fit your interest as well, because it's a story that has really had an influence on me. Another epic is the Ramayana, which is a Hindu epic. That one has influenced some of my writing, I would say, kind of like how you were saying this one has influenced some of yours. So if that interests you, that could be a potential one that I would also reread. You wouldn't want to read the actual Ramayana, but you would read like a summary of it. It's very long. That's what I read. I read I could tell you, I don't have it anymore, but the edition I read was really nice. But yeah, so I'll throw that one out there too. Someone says sci-fi. Okay. Yeah, I'm interested in science fiction. I don't read it as much, but for sure. The Ramayana it has the A at the end. It's one of those weird things with with pronunciation with a lot of their names where they have an A, but you don't always say it. But my understanding is you say the Ramayana. That's how you pronounce it. But it's a great story, and it's really interesting. Has a lot of ethical consideration, which it's considered like a religious text in Hinduism, because it has so many moral questions in it. It's cool.
Okay.
One more, wait, one more possible one. that I haven't read yet that is also really, really epic is the other big Hindu one is the Mahabharata. Am I saying it right? Mahabharata. Yeah. And that one also, again, you would not want to read the actual one because no one does because it's enormous. It's like 8 times larger than the Bible or something. But reading some of it or a summary of it would be cool. It's a pretty cool story. So potentially.
Okay, let's I don't know. I'll think about which one to do. To do
sure.
next.
Think about it.
Like, we could even do some biblical stories.
Oh yeah, I've been wanting to also go back and read the Bible too, or read certain stories of it. It has been many years. Last time I read it, I was a Christian, and I'm not anymore. But I would like to read some of those again. So,
well, when Cameron was telling me to read the Odyssey, he was also recommending several biblical stories.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Reference. So, all right. Well, I tell you what, let's not sort that out here. But
Sure.
I'll text you and let's go back and forth. And let's pick the next thing to read. And next, it doesn't
Sure.
have to be the whole book, even if we're like, all right, let's do 3 or 4 chapters before something or something like that.
Yeah.
Although I should tell people not next week, in 2 weeks, because Brianna and I have been getting together every 2 weeks on the stream. In 2 weeks, Cameron is going to be joining us, and we're going to have another discussion in the fall. So in 2 weeks, Cameron is going to be bringing his. Cameron's going to be here, and he's going to be talking about his perspective on the fall, and we're going to continue our discussion on that.
I'm really looking forward to that. Oh, someone mentions the 3-body problem. Sure enough, that is actually on my very long list of books to eventually read. So if you're also interested in it, Heath, let me know.
I don't know anything about that one.
That is one of the most prominent Chinese science fiction authors today. Some of his books have recently been turned into films. He is he's like the big Chinese science fiction author, and he has several other books, and I haven't read any of them, but yeah.
Well, he's talking about, James says, I was once reading totally hang. Like, I think that because we had talked about it would be great to do some of these stories as a film or TV show or something like that for their own sake.
Yeah,
which
we should discuss some of the ones that you and I like the most.
Yeah, I was writing years ago. I was writing Samson as a story, but I think I had a hard drive crash and I lost all of my.
Oh no, that's sad.
Yeah, I know, because I was like totally into Samson at one time.
Yeah.
But actually, just Book of Judges in general,
like
what was going on there, and didn't we talk about David, the King
David? I read David as a corruption arc, so that could be thematically related.
Well, God, okay.
I have my own theory on that story, and that's my 2 favorite biblical stories have got to be David and then Joseph, for different reasons.
Joseph, you're talking about.
Yes, the coat of many colors.
The coat of many colors. Yeah. I was, but not the not the father of Christ.
No, he's not really all that interesting.
We should totally, man. We have just generated an entire year worth of stuff right here, because I love the coat of many colors.
Yeah,
I love that, and in fact,
literally that story, just reading the actual story in the Bible, has made me cry twice.
Yeah, well, I am a huge fan of that. So, okay,
I think it's the family stuff. Family stuff really gets me. Yeah.
Let's organize. Man, okay.
We should probably end the live stream and talk.
More than once every 2 weeks, and otherwise it'll be 10
possibly,
years.
Yeah. I mean, but I'm down.
Yeah, I remember reading The Coat of Many Colors, Joseph and the Coat of Many Colors, and I believe it was Sunday school in 4th grade. Now, because in general, I don't think of Sunday school as being something that's just fantastic that you have to go to, right? That's not one of my experience, except for in 4th grade at husband and wife Sunday school teacher team that like took it seriously. Yeah. And like, I did not want to miss Sunday school. Like, it's like, oh my God, because they were actually going through the stories, and we were like, and we went through the Coat of Many Colors, and I could not wait to go back. I mean, they blew Sunday school away.
Yeah.
Because most of the time Sunday school is like, okay, color this picture, and hey, remember not to kick your sister or something like but they did a fantastic job. And that's when I was introduced to that. And I was like, wait a minute, there's what in this book? Hold on, wait a minute. Because that was the first time anybody had ever treated the Bible as a series of stories and what was in it. And we went through it, and it was fantastic. And that's when I developed my love for that. James says, have you ever read the
not yet
Apocrypha?
Will.
Yes, I have. I don't know that
Mhm.
I've read Gnostic scriptures. I don't think I've ever read any of them,
Mhm.
but I have read the Apocrypha.
Yeah, I
Or
have
no, I
not
don't know
yet.
if I've read it all, but the Book of Tobit is one of my favorites
Hmm.
because it actually involves an angel
Uh,
that is involved. All right. Well, shall we call it? Shall we wrap for this evening?
I think we should.
All right. I think we should too. All right. We'll talk then. I wrote down all of our ideas over here.
Yeah, I
So
guess if people watch us later, if they comment on the video, if they have any other ideas, feel free to do so.
put it in the comment section. Thank you, everybody. I have enjoyed it. It's been a wonderful evening. Thank you very much for being here, Brianna.
Yes.
It's been great. All right. So I'll see you in the morning for World Building Wednesdays, everybody. 9:30. Later, everybody.
See you.
Bye.